Welcome to the Progtalks by the Progspace. Welcome to the Progtalks, an interview series by the Progspace where we will be talking to musicians in all corners of the progressive music scene. Welcome back to the Progtalks, everyone. Once again with me, Uncle Prog. A little bit under the weather today, but I'm still very excited because I do have one of my favorite musicians, Joshua Corum from Head with Wings, is joining me today. How are you doing, Josh?
Hey, Runa. I'm well. Yeah, thank you for having me.
Yeah, I'm very glad you wanted to come on. Of course, I'm very familiar with the band, your music, everything, but there might be people out there watching this who are not that familiar. So would you please just let us know a little bit about who is Head with Wings and who is Joshua Corum, what's your role in the band and so on?
Sure. Yeah. So I'm Josh. I sing and previously was playing guitar in a what I'd say is a rock band called Head with Wings. We tend to, I guess, reside in more of the alternative and progressive rock sphere, I suppose, on the internet. We've played, for example, Euroblast Festival, so there's a bit of an experimental vibe in the music. Sometimes we're classified as post rock, sometimes we're called art rock, prog metal. It seems to be anything in that conceptual rock domain is where you might find Head with Wings residing. I started the band back in 2008. It then had a bit of a resurgence in 2012 when we first, published our first EP. Became more of a proper band around that time with studio productions over the course of the next 6 to 8 years. Put out a debut in 2018 that seemed to do pretty well in the prog underground prog circles, and just most recently put out an EP on July 16th called Comfort and Illusion. That's a 3-track that pretty much would catch you up to the state of the band, up to 2020, where we then started working on the follow-up, which hopefully will come out next year. But lately I'm singing in the band. I used to have more of a dominant role on guitar. Lately, Brandon Cousino, the other, I should say, maybe half of the brain of the band,
founder of the.
Sorry,
the founder and the other founder, really. Of
right.
Yeah,
totally. Pretty much. Yeah, I would say as of it kind of started with me in 2008, and then once he came on board in 2011, 2012, it became more of a partnership.
Yeah.
But ever since that point, he's been leading the charge on guitar.
Yeah.
And that pretty much it's a pretty decent summary of who I am and where the band came from.
I agree. And you mentioned, of course, your most recent EP, Comfort in Illusion, like you said, released on July the 16th. I can see the feedback has been coming in, quick and hard. And there's been a lot of, people have been talking a lot about it. Have you been reading the opinions on the album? Are you happy with the feedback you guys are receiving?
Yeah, I actually, I pretty much read everything, and I'm waiting to run into the one that just, either pisses me off or throws me for a loop. But that just hasn't happened yet. So either I'm not seeing those or they're just not coming out, which is great. I mean, there's probably been about 20 write-ups that I've seen from all around the world, around Europe, throughout the US, which we didn't really get much coverage in the US on the debut, because our publicity was with Lulu with Incendia Music in the UK.
In the UK, yeah.
So, UK, really good press. France in particular, there's been really good press. Germany, Norway, I think Belgium. I've seen a review from Brazil. I mean, it's really been great. Sent a CD to Chile the other day. So, I mean, there's, it's exceeding my expectations for what you would think would be possible for just 3 songs. I think we all dug deep and just kind of crossed our fingers that a relatively short EP would go over well in the progressive community, which is just kind of ironic, right?
Yeah,
but
I agree. Yeah, and also you guys must be working hard on getting those things out there. Of course, you guys are self-made. I would say you're not working with a label at the moment, and has to be a lot of work that goes into this to sort of bring it out there in social media and get it out to all outlets and all that stuff, right?
It does take away from some of the stuff that I would want to be doing, which is, writing more, maybe getting more like, I don't know, maybe more accustomed to self-producing, which I tend to rely on the brilliance of others to bring my vision, to light. Yeah. But yeah, it's a lot. We brought on Billy James from Glass Onion PR, and they're in Asheville, North Carolina. So Billy is working it from, his perspective through his contacts and his network. And then I'm kind of picking up where we left off with Incendia. Yeah. Kind of working in tandem with Billy. And between the two of us, we're casting a decent net and getting some decent results.
Yeah, because I have to say, I see you, for someone like me who's sort of has quite the net spread out, through the progressive music world. I have to say, I see you pop up a lot more places this time than you did with the album. So it's obviously been quite a learning process or an improvement there also on your part on how to present yourself, I would say.
Well, thanks for that. Yeah, it's, we put a lot of effort into the videos and the music and the presentation and the marketing and whatnot, the advertising. So we want all of it to just kind of come out in a professional manner. Because just because we're not with a label, it doesn't mean that we don't, want to kind of feel like we're represented by someone else necessarily, but it's really just ourselves. And I'm glad that you noticed that you see it kind of reaching out a bit further than where we were previously.
Yeah, very much so. And related to that, the 3 tracks on the EP were all released sort of like singles beforehand. So anyone who's, really a fan of the band, they had the chance to listen to these tracks before the EP dropped. So I'm guessing that's was a conscious strategy on your part. And also, is that something you will be following up with any future releases, you think?
Yeah. So to give you a bit of context, the reason I'll say this first, as a fan of plenty of other bands and as a listener in the audience, it's a little weird to the day an EP comes out, all the songs have already been out, with the exception of maybe some of the stuff that was on the expanded edition on Bandcamp. I don't think I'm going to do that again, because I do want there to be something for people that, pre-order it to get, as like a special listen or a release that they haven't heard yet. But the reality is that we spread out those singles like that to try to gain a bit more of a presence on streaming platforms and to try to create a bit of virality, I suppose, on the internet, because those platforms just don't work for people that don't keep feeding that algorithm.
No, they don't. You're right.
So that's why we did it. We just wanted to try to see if we could gain some traction on let's say Spotify. But when we brought on the PR, Billy was very much about, still having physical promo copies to send out to the media and such. So we ended up shifting from what was going to be a digital only release, to be honest, exclusively digital, to pressing CDs and kind of bringing together this whole, visual package that really wasn't going to be the case before we brought him on. So this go around, we had to call a few audibles and really just kind of pivot and change the course of the release strategy to kind of eventually wind up at this date that our publicist largely helped kind of solidify.
Yeah, because I have to say that, first having these singles released sort of brought some attention to you with each track coming out. But then I think, you know, the genius of it now, where you are getting quite a bit of attention from a lot of outlets and so on, is that now the EP is coming out, and it's not only coming out, you know, as these 3 tracks, it's also coming out as this extended edition, which sort of adds another layer of things, and it almost feels like a full album, you know, with all the remixes that Vikram did and all this stuff. So would you talk a little bit about how this idea came up? And also, of course, you worked with Vikram before on your last album. He did some remixes, right? So how did that come about?
Yeah, well, the first go around, which was a year after From Worry to Shame came out, so it was like 2019 we first collaborated with Vikram.
Yes.
That was simply me just following him on the web and seeing just how brilliant, you know, his playing was, and how his ability to kind of just hear a song and just by ear kind of play it all out with, you know, with all the nuance, elements that he kind of brings out elements of bands in his arrangement that are maybe just kind of hidden in you know, in the studio recording, or almost stuff that would be like in the undercurrent of our songs, you know, that maybe the stuff that you would maybe almost hear subconsciously in the tune, but it's not actually there. He has a way of kind of bringing that out in his playing. So I simply reached out to him, and, you know, he took a listen to the material, and we just picked. Actually, I think I pitched him. You know, can you do a melody? Because I heard like a Haken melody, or not a melody, medley rather.
Yeah.
So, you know, I was like, try your medley strategy with From Worry to Shame. That came out awesome, and then we just picked one tune that inspired him out of the whole album to do a full cover of. Yeah. And I thought that stuff came out gorgeous.
It did. And yeah.
Thanks. And then what is it? About a year or two later, we just said, I approached him again and just said, hey, do you want to do that again? And simply just cover the 3 songs on the EP, to which he thought that would be kind of a stale idea if we just did the same thing again. So that's why he kind of flipped the songs on their head, flipped the script, and just did almost like, maybe remix is the wrong word, but like almost like a retelling of the song.
I agree. Yeah, because they are, you know, the original songs are beautiful, but then, you know, his reimagining of the songs is like it's like a almost like a dream, like it's like you're hearing the song again in a dream or something. It's very, very strange and quite fascinating. And of course, we have to say we're talking about Vikram Shankar, who is of course known from Lux Terminus and Silent Skies and everything. It's just a very talented guy, and I have to say he brought an extra, you know, level to this EP.
And originally, you know, as you saw, those remixes came out in between the actual EP songs. So even that was the original strategy. And as we kind of moved along, I had the idea like, well, this is going to be its own unique release. You know, why not? Yeah. To which Brandon then suggested that we include the instrumental you know, mixes of the, you know, the standard EP, which gives you a different perspective, because all of Mike Short's lead guitar playing on all those songs, with the vocals, they're almost like dueling in a way. You know, they're occupying a lot of the same territory, or like musical real estate, you know, frequency wise, between the lead and the lead guitar and the lead vocal. So when you remove the lead vocal, and you just kind of get to appreciate, you know, the guitar nuance a little bit more. So even though that's not necessarily how we want to portray ourselves as a band, we still wanted people to be able to gain that perspective if they weren't like squinting and really just, you know, digging into the mix, you know, the nitty gritty of the mix.
Exactly. So. Well, sorry. Well,
That's okay.
anyway, it's being able to hear these songs, the instrumental versions as well gives you even more appreciation for a lot of the little details that are happening in your music. So I think this together, this extended edition is quite the thing, and I would say that to anyone that wants to check it out, listen to the EP, that's okay, but the extended edition, that's where it is, that's where it's at for me. But
Cool.
from one EP to another, because I want to go back to in time to your first EP, Living with the Loss, which is it's that 2013 or 12 that was released.
It was like March 5th of 2013 is when that came out on Bandcamp. And I don't think we put it out through CD Baby at the time. We used DistroKid for Digital Distro now. But that was our one release through CD Baby. And we only pressed a limited, like a local supply of CDs. I don't even think we sold them online. I think it was just at shows back then. We would just play local shows. And that was like our one merch item with maybe like a shirt, just our original logo shirt.
Well, that EP sort of was, of course, where I discovered you guys, and to this day, this EP is something that has followed me. I actually listened to that on. Yeah, I've listened to it again today. It's just has a lot of good songs on there, and even if I would say, of course, that there's you can easily trace, the progress of your guys as musicians, for you as a vocalist. Of course, things you have become more accomplished. There's sort of a rawness and some strong emotions on that EP that is quite unmatched to me. How did the creation of these songs? How did they come along? And what's the story behind Living with the Loss?
So that honestly, I think what it is all it could have been, because we just were more inexperienced back then. And I think not having the baggage of where you're trying to take a career or an identity, that EP was more about, what kind of foundation can we have as a band, instead of where are we going. And I think a lot of the where are we going, how do we continue on, what is the legacy stuff, that could really, I'm not saying it did corrupt us, but it can, and it definitely can make a band sound different moving forward. But there was like a certain kind of honesty on that EP that Frank, I think, really was able to pull out. Probably both Frank and Jamie, when they would come to our garage, that EP was conceived in a garage. As opposed to, a rehearsal room or a studio or what have you. So you have a couple of guys, jamming out some pretty primitive ideas in a garage. And then, a couple would-be producers come in and say, well, we're going to get you out of this garage and get you into a studio and, get your shit together. And that's kind of what happened. And the lyrics, I don't think I really even finished them until shortly before I tracked vocals.
Okay.
And all I knew about it was that I wanted each song had to do with kind of like the loss of like innocence, childhood, friendship, moving on from the the overwatch of your family or your parents, your protectors. And so Living with the Loss was really, each song was about a different kind of loss. And just kind of growing up in a way, but growing up in a world that you just maybe aren't necessarily comfortable in or comfortable moving on with, because in a way you move on with the loss, but all there is to do is live with it, right? Like,
you
don't move
right?
on. But you carry it with you. And that was kind of just, it was simple. It wasn't like this big heady concept with chapters or narratives, or to be continued moments or what have you.
Yeah.
It was just here are these 4 chapters. Each one has to do with the loss of something, and we're gonna move on and live with it, kind of thing. And that was it.
Yeah, it spoke very, very strongly to me. I guess also because I've had experienced loss in my life quite recently when that EP reached me. And so for me, it sort of was something that was very, what can I say? It was emotional, and it was open, you felt like it was speaking to you in some way. And I wanted to ask about the lyrical content of Head with Wings, because it seems very heartfelt. It seems very personal, yet at the same time, it seems to touch on a lot of things that a lot of people struggle with, So where do you draw the inspiration for those lyrics, and how is your creative process when it comes to writing?
So, yeah, I would say I know how to react more emotionally than like compositionally, I should say.
Yeah.
Like, so at first, when I hear a musical idea, like a riff or a passage, whatever, a chord just being picked through, it's like my mind doesn't go necessarily to like arrangement or composition. It goes to like an emotional outcry.
Yeah.
So I always start there. How does that make me feel? And from that point, I kind of just let it loose, and then I sculpt, the melodic. I sculpt the melodic idea, and then kind of think about what it means to me and what that, I look at it like introspectively, but then also as like a citizen of the world, or a citizen of society, and how that might reflect out and then back in. So I'm still taking stock of a bit of like an external presence, I suppose, which ends up kind of reinforcing more of like a global thematic structure these days, at least.
Yes.
But it always starts with like bonding with like a raw musical idea that is deeply ingrained in emotion, because I've had some like foundational moments in my life. I won't even say career, because it was like well before that.
Yeah.
That kind of cemented to me that, music doesn't have to be technical to touch people, but there's like an emotional complexity that is kind of like our bread and butter, like the complexity. Sure, some of the arrangements are tricky, but the complexity comes from the emotional baggage and I guess the juxtaposition and the counterpoint between all of these kind of conflicting feels and emotions. So, I kind of, as the singer, I kind of look at myself as like the arbiter of processing those emotions.
Yeah,
and that's it. And I think maybe you're right. It was probably in its purest form on Living with the Loss. But then once you kind of harness your powers, if you will, as a musician, then you could start to navigate something, more grandiose.
Exactly. And also maybe able to look at it from a little bit more of a meta perspective, right? Like you say,
exactly.
It's coming out very raw at the beginning, and now you're able to pull back a little bit from it and sort of reshape it in a way. And I think that's it's possible to hear that with the first EP, and it's possible to hear that with your newer stuff. But so of course you do the lyrics, but how does the creation of the musical component of Head with Wings work? Who writes? Do you guys write together? Do you a lot of guys now is like this in this digital world, people send each other ideas back and forth. Some of course like to sit together and maybe almost jam out things. How does it work, and how has it changed since the beginning of the band?
Yeah, I would say back on Living with the Loss, as I mentioned, it was a garage band, literally just jamming it out and not really having much of a structure, right?
Yeah.
And then in between like 2012 and 2016, when we started from the production of From Worry to Shame, those songs kind of took form, in the jam room, but always with one of us on guitar coming in, me or Brandon, and showing, kind of bringing in like the guts of something.
Yeah.
And then the band would kind of flesh it out, and then we'd play the shows and play the material out. And there were shows where I wouldn't even have vocals or lyrics solidified. I would just kind of sing lyrical passages and then non-lyric vocal. And I did that for a long time, and nobody even knew. They just maybe I just sold it. And like you're saying, it was more about the feel and the emotion, right? Like you don't necessarily care about the words to a certain degree. That's more for like a singer or lyricist to obsess about.
Exactly. Yeah.
And from that point, so each project has been different. It starts in the garage, then into a rehearsal room, and then you're playing out shows. And then when it came to the material after From Worry to Shame, those were largely Brandon compositions on guitar that we then brought in and did kick around in the rehearsal room. By the time Steve Hill joined the band, someone like Steve on bass, someone like Steve kind of will weigh in on, okay, well, this just doesn't feel necessarily right to me, so maybe try this. But really, that's just a matter of transitional moments. Maybe a tempo change here. He's concerned about dynamics more than maybe me necessarily. So they'll actually, when we have like a draft of a song, he and Brandon more recently just charted it out on a whiteboard, just simply to look at a graph of the dynamic and the intensity of the song. And just simply by looking at, that graph, you can kind of see what kind of a roller coaster you're working with. So, there was a bit of that. And then on the newest stuff that's coming next year, a lot of that was Brandon bringing in some primitive ideas into the jam room, and then not, I guess, jamming on it in the way where we would run the bit over and over and then just kind of huddle and talk about where do we want it to go? How do we want it to transition? Is the tempo too fast here? Because we really just play with the tempo changes a lot. That's just something that we've come to just do in our band, it's like a subtlety that people tend to acknowledge over time. So that's all to say. It's every song is almost different. Every production is different. And it's always a mix of like prepared jamming, if that makes sense. We don't just go in and just start noodling.
It
Someone
makes
always
sense,
brings in something.
If you are enjoying this interview, please head over to theprogspace.com for more reviews, articles, pictures and interviews all about progressive music. You can also find us on Facebook, Twitter and Instagram. theprogspace.com. Touching on that, the complexities of your music and the way you play around with tempo changes and you play around with the lyrical content and everything. I remember when your debut album From Worry to Shame dropped in 2018. I saw some discussion online, this standard always going on, if your music really was prog or whatever, strangely enough, I seem to see these comments often when it comes to bands that operate on the edges of the different genres, even though that approach might really be much more progressive than some more formulaic prog bands. So I wanted to ask, what do you feel Hedwig Wing's place within, progressive music is? Do you sort of feel comfortable within the genre?
So, it's that's tough because I've gone back and forth on that. Some of my closest colleagues, for example, have just come right out and said, I really don't think your band's prog. But meanwhile, we get covered in prog, in the prog sphere or paradigm, right?
Very much.
Truthfully, the band does tend to utilize more pop structure, but as the listener, it becomes a little bit illusory because the whole point of our songs are to be like mini films, right? So when you're watching a movie, you don't want to be thinking about the form of the movie, right? How they edited it. The editing is supposed to make it fluid and have continuity, right?
Yeah.
You want all the shots are a certain way. The cutting is a certain way. It's just put together in a way where it's the audience should not feel that they're watching a production. It's
Exactly.
they're just part of an experience and they're in this world, right? So that's like fundamentally what we're after with Head with Wings songs. And I think the illusion that creates to the listener is almost what represents prog for us, or why they think we're prog, because we almost don't allow them to think about the structure of what they're listening to. We just kind of grab their hand and then go. And I think I really do think that, you know, if you break down musically, if you start breaking it down, you could probably make the argument that it's progressive, right? Because you can start tracing out the time signatures, the phrasings, the voicings, the chord progressions, the tempo changes, the twists and turns, and everything that you would associate with prog. But as I said, within almost like a pop paradigm in a way. So I think we bridged the gap between probably more what used to be considered alternative rock, right? Because I've talked with publicists and they'll be the first to tell me, don't market your band as an alternative rock band. Because alternative rock is not what it was in the 90s or the 2000s.
No,
I don't
it's
think
not.
It's like the new pop where every decade pop changes, right? So it's like prog has always been pretty much prog. I mean, there's subgenres, right? There's like a million subgenres on Prog Archives.
Exactly.
But what's funny about that is we were denied from Prog Archives. You know, they actually brought From Worry to Shame to the Round Table of Prog.
I remember that.
Yeah, and they actually denied it for being. Someone submitted it. Actually, I shouldn't say someone. I know River Tree, someone that I know, submitted it as heavy prog or crossover prog.
Crossover, yeah.
Right. So heavy prog is like what bands that you would know, like Carnival, for example, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
That's like a heavy prog, and a crossover prog would be like Porcupine Tree or Steven Wilson solo records.
Yeah.
So somehow they determined that Head with Wings wasn't within either of those subgenres, but the linchpin to the whole thing was that there's no keyboard or piano or organ or synth presence in the band. Okay, and that was enough to declassify us as a not a progressive band.
Yeah.
So at the end of the day, having the dialogue out there is a good thing. I can't necessarily say if we're prog or not. What I can say is that conceptually, I think we're a progressive band because of our concepts.
Yeah.
Because it's a bit outside the box. And, you know, I could compare it to something like Radiohead, which is also a band that's not on Prog Archives, but clearly if you dissect their music, there's progressive stuff all over the place. But I guess I'll end with this. I did read, or this portion with this is that Profile Prog, which is like a French Canadian outlet.
Yeah.
For progressive music, like they do radio as well, and you know, album critiques. They gave us, it was like an 8.3 out of 10 for the new EP, and it was a really good score. But they end the review with saying that, you know, that this isn't a progressive band, but they still really liked it. So they're a progressive outlet reviewing a band that they claim to be non-prog and giving it a solid, you know, B review, if you will. So it's like, I don't know what to make of it. It's like we're accepted as prog in more outlets than we're denied. So I guess I'll just leave it with that. I don't know what else to make of that.
No, I think for me it's funny, just because, like I said, in when I asked the question, you know, I think the thing is that a band like yours that straddles so many genres and brings so many elements into it to the point where it's hard to classify you. I can't think of anything more progressive than that. And so for me, you know, it's also, I think I resonate a lot with what you said about the craftsmanship of your music, because of course, when you start to dig through it, there's a lot of, you know, stuff going on, more technical stuff going on underneath the surface, but it's so masterfully done that when you're just listening to it, you don't really notice that. Like you say, it's like with a movie where you're not thinking about how did they do this shot, because you're so invested in the emotions of the story. So for me,
Exactly.
I don't know how much power I hold or I should hold, but Uncle Prog gives this the clear stamp of progressive music. That's no discussion there. I want to mention from Worry to Shame a bit more. Of course, you already received a lot of well-deserved praise for that album, and you had the assistance of the guys from Earthside, like you had on the first EP. Also, there was quite a long break between the EP and From Worry to Shame, to the point where I was thinking, I love the EP, but this is one of those bands that, that just flare up and burn out, and I would never hear from you again. So what happened between that, and what can you tell me about the recording and of From Worry to Shame?
Sure. So I would say, let's see, From Worry to Shame came out in June of 2018.
Yeah.
And then, so essentially, between the promotion of that EP, we were searching during that summer, right, of 2018. We were basically looking out for where to play, right? We were trying to pitch to get onto tour packages with bands in the progressive market.
Yeah.
We were dusting off the live band. We didn't have a live band during the promotion of From Worry to Shame. Our band essentially fell apart.
I remember that.
So Brandon and I promoted the debut as a duo, right? So when that came out, we were a quote unquote songwriting duo.
Yeah.
Which is not super far from the truth. But we've always, kind of been proud of being a band and an ensemble. So while we were promoting that record and getting all those videos produced and doing the whole thing, we were also trying to rebuild the band. And not only that, but from immediately rebuilding the band and looking for a bassist. And I think we actually didn't, we had Mike Short, who plays guitar on the EP, on drums. So we had a phase where he was already a drummer and now he is our drummer again, but we can get to that. So it was like rebuilding the band, rehearsing, getting everyone to learn the repertoire, and then pitching to shows, getting denied for, from XYZ tour or festival because, late to the game and it's very competitive. And we were very, very new and green to the media. Right. So even though we had been a band forever, it's just, you're only as like new or relevant as when you put something out. So
of course,
or if you've never truly published something before, even if you've been a band for 10 years, well, guess what? Now you're a new band again.
now you're new again. Yeah.
So we went through those growing pains, played some shows in 2018. And then immediately I kind of just was hell bent on getting us to Europe. So basically it took almost another year of just applying to XYZ event. And then I think the spring of 2019, it took months to kind of plan the tour with Soul Splitter, which we did around Euroblast. So then, it's like we built the band, got rehearsed, played some gigs, built a tour. And during that time, when we were getting the tour situated in the, the spring or summer of 2019, I ended up taking on a side project with Drifting Sun.
Yeah, exactly.
A UK neo prog band, just because I kind of wanted to satisfy this urge to want to do something that was a little bit more retro,
Yeah.
And almost something that would fly in the face of the prog critics who
exactly.
said we didn't have any keyboards and Head with Wings. So I went and did
credential.
So I went and did a project that was, helmed by a piano player.
Exactly.
So did that, and that kind didn't really get in the way of Head with Wings too much on that one. Because we were just getting the tour situated, and Steve Hill actually, our bass player, produced my vocals on that Drifting Sun release.
Really? Yeah.
So he and I got to kind of, get to know each other a bit more over that project.
Together. Yeah.
And then that all kind of just led into a bunch of rehearsing to get ready for Euroblast and the Soul Splitter tour. And I think on that tour, we debuted Of Uncertainty, which was a much different song back then. So the roots, so now to tie it into Comfort and Illusion, the roots of those songs on Comfort and Illusion from this year were basically, we were kicking those around in like 2017, 18, 19.
Yeah.
And just letting them live and breathe, and exist for a long time, which was not uncommon for us to let song ideas kind of steep for a long time. So they're kind of lived in, a little bit. Like we live in them a little bit before letting anyone else live in them.
Exactly. Yeah.
That kind of thing. So that way they prove their value to us in a weird way. But yeah, so we unveiled Of Uncertainty, and then we got back from tour and we just changed the crap out of that song.
Yeah.
After, gigging on it for a little bit. And then that led into a little bit of pre-production for this EP. And then immediately in the end of 2019 into early 2020, we started the production proper on Comfort and Illusion, and finally just brought those songs to fruition that have been kicking around for a few years after the debut. And that's kind of how all that went.
Yeah, and speaking of live performances, of course you had your Euroblast experience, and then your tour with German prog band Soul Splitter, which I feel was a very positive experience for you guys.
Oh yeah.
But you managed to get back on stage now just recently, right? First gig in a very long time with two other great bands, Moontooth and Lost Becomes. How did the gig turn out?
Oh, it was great. The promoter was awesome. Really, really great promoter in Connecticut. Manic Presents. They've just kind of had a monopoly on the scene for like over 10 years in Connecticut. Yeah. And Moontooth was from Long Island, and to me, I always thought they were kind of like a heavy blues band, and they're heavy blue, almost like heavy blues meets metal. Yeah, and they just blew me away. Absolutely insane performance. Their guitarist is in a band called Riot. I guess an 80s band.
Yep.
Not super familiar with them, but they seem to have been pretty popular. And then Lost Becomes is more of a hardcore band, I'd say, which was interesting, being sandwiched in between Head with Wings and Moontooth. So that was like a wake up call for anyone who didn't know what they were getting into that night.
Exactly. Yeah.
Awesome show. All the bands killed it. And the only thing that we had against us that night was that one town over was Spirit Box and Limp Bizkit.
Ooh.
that took draw from the night.
Of course. That's always a challenge when stuff like that happens. But I'm glad to hear that went well. And like you said, Moontooth is interesting to me. I played them on my Prog Files a couple of times, my radio show. Like you said, cool. A very, very cool band. And I had to familiarize myself with Lost Becomes as well, and like you say, not really a prog band, but still I can imagine they were energetic and powerful on stage. Yeah. So that sounds like a great night, and I want to move on a bit then, because you have been mentioning a few times now about your situation with the drummer, changing the drummer and everything. And recently I saw you announce that you had another little change in your lineup, or maybe bringing in a new man, Tyler Young, on drums, right? Is he then the replacement for Andrew Testa, who played on previous albums? What can you tell us about this change and this new guy that's joining up?
Sure, yeah. So Tyler is the drummer of Black River Union, which you've heard before. I know, because I sent you some stuff.
Also played on the Prog Files. Fantastic band, yeah.
Yeah, so they're produced at Silver Bullet, where we did our current EP, And Tyler, just to give a bit of a backstory on him, he lives at the studio, Silver Bullet Studios, where it's kind of like almost a room and board studio. Like, so if you're working there, you can kind of stay there. And then upstairs, the producers live there.
I see.
And they have like a Studio A and Studio B, one's downstairs, one's upstairs. And then there's just a lot going on there. So anyway, Tyler's like a roommate there. So he does a ton of session work and just hadn't gigged in a long time. And honestly, he was a candidate to replace Andrew the first time Andrew left back in 2016. So Andrew left originally for like 2 years, then came back and did the whole post From Worry to Shame, like gigging push with us. And so Tyler, I would say, is now a member of our musical collective. He's not an official band member. To play the material on From Worry to Shame and Comfort and Illusion, we have a lot of those interweaving guitar lines. Yeah. So Mike Short, also from Black River Union, being a musical powerhouse, his first instrument was drums. So he just became quite prolific on guitar, but always kind of kept up his drum chops. So what we did is basically we wrote the next record as a 4-piece with Brandon on guitar, me on vocals, Steve on bass and Mike on drums. Yeah. So we dropped there's going to be overdubs and whatnot. We're still sorting that out, but on the new record. But the goal with the new one was to kind of like establish everyone as more of an individual identity, not to the detriment of a band chemistry, but more like a band like Tool, where like everyone stands out for what they do. Exactly. Because on previous Head with Wings releases, I know I keep harping on film, and that's still important to us, but you don't necessarily know who's playing what guitar part unless you're like super familiar with the players. Yeah. It's meant to be more of this fluid experience where the arrangements are meant to be kind of so interlocked, and that we've kind of filled every nook and cranny of the mix. Well, now we at least started this production with everyone's making a statement on their instrument, So that's a bit of a distinction moving forward. So that's all to say, when we play shows that require us to have the two guitars and backing vocals, then Tyler will step in, and Mike will bump back to guitar and vocals. So it's a little bit crazy, but we work with people that are talented enough to pull that off. So why not?
Yeah, and also, I remember you mentioned to me quite a while back that Mike was sort of returning to the drum chair for a bit or for parts, and I was thinking to myself, the guy is such a genius on the guitar that I hope there's gonna be some way of seeing him on stage with those lovely leads as well. So I'm very happy to hear that you have this like a little bit of an open approach to how you're gonna do it. That's nice to hear. Of course we are nearing the end of our talk. Time is running, but at the end I wanna you mentioned a bit about it already, about the future, but what does the future hold now for Head with Wings? Are you hoping to or planning to do more live shows coming up? And you already mentioned that you're working on new material. Can you tell us a little bit about when we can hope to hear something more?
Yeah, sure. So we have this habit of, once we get involved in a production, we tend to not focus on rehearsing for live performance. Outside of those songs that we're rehearsing for the record, of course. But so we're about to, I think, September 8th. So about a month from now, literally almost a month from the day, we're going to be starting drum tracking. So it's officially starting.
It's quite close, yeah.
And if we're lucky, we want to follow up this EP within a year or less. Right. So at minimum by next July, we would probably want, a single to come out.
To have something,
So we want to, if we want to, like an album, maybe like a 2-year cycle. If we do an EP, we want to follow it up within a year. We kind of missed that boat a little bit. 2018. Yeah, we kind of missed that boat a little bit following up from Worry to Shame. I think it took 3 years to get something else out.
Yeah.
But I think we're, with the lineup the way it is and with how driven everyone seems to be, I think we can kind of get on that schedule, and we're poised to actually make that happen.
To make that happen, yeah.
Where it gets tricky is when you start getting the music video stuff involved. So, like for example, the whole the Black Soil sequence that I call it for the Comfort and Illusion video series, that took months and months for Igor to develop.
To get right, yeah.
So, and then with there being like an 8 or 9 month lead time apparently on getting vinyl out, which we want it to come out. We want the next release to come out on vinyl right away. So that's like a big thing to us.
Yeah,
we've never put out a vinyl record before, and we want, as like the finale to the From Worry to Shame story, this one we just really want to drive home. We want to have more merch designs, more everything to offer people that have jumped on board with us now with this EP. Because
exactly, yeah.
It's almost like every time someone buys our new EP on Bandcamp, they go back and they grab From Worry to Shame, which is amazing.
Yeah.
Like, I just checked before our call, both releases are on literally on page 3 of Bandcamp best-selling prog rock right now.
Wow, that's very cool.
So, feeling really good about that. But when I start to think about merch and sales and stuff, like I just want there to be more options for people.
I agree. That sounds like a good idea indeed.
So what that means is Darcy and I, essentially have a lot of work to do. I have a call with her. She's our illustrator tomorrow to basically figure out album design layout for CD, for vinyl, merch designs, shirts, what have you, everything. It's like go. So that's like all full steam ahead. And we even have a title for the record and everything. So it's like it's on.
I'm very, 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 very glad to hear that. And of course, there can always be, something happening in between. But I truly hope that when we come to next summer, next autumn, there will be some even more new Head with Wings music for me and other people to enjoy. So, well, thank you so much, Joshua, for being on the Prog Talks with me.
My pleasure.
Of course, all you guys out there should go follow Head with Wings on their social medias. All the links will be in the description here. I also highly recommend you to listen to Comfort in Illusion as well as their earlier releases if you haven't already. You can listen on streaming services, of course, or even better, go to their Bandcamp and purchase the stuff. That's well worth it. So, as always, to the people watching and listening at home, please like and subscribe if you enjoyed it. It helps us out a bit. Until next time, stay safe and keep spreading that prog love. The Prog Talks, produced by the Progspace. Main host, Rune Belsvik Reinås. Produced by Rune Belsvik Reinås, Vanessa and Matthias Kirsch. All graphics and animations by Vanessa Kirsch. Intro theme by Giuseppe Negri. Outro theme by Zach Munowitz. This was the Prog Talks by the Progspace. See you in a week.